Good morning, everyone. It's really good to see you all here today. And please feel free to get up and stretch and get a drink if you need to. I'll try not to bore you. I am actually really excited and privileged to be able to talk to you this morning about developments in cardiomyopathy research and clinical trials. I apologize in advance. One of our colleagues who was going to speak this morning, Ken Margulies, couldn't be here, but he did share some of his slides for me to share with you today, so you have me for half an hour. And what I'll try to do this morning is to provide an overview of current research in cardiomyopathy, both from the adult perspective and also the pediatric perspective. This won't be an exhaustive review of every single line of research that we're pursuing. And if you walk out of here with one thing from my talk, I hope it would be that things are really happening. I know sometimes it feels like things move at a snail's pace with respect to research and advancements, but in 2019, there's never been a better time. You guys live with cardiomyopathy and you live with this day to day, but there are things happening in the laboratory and there are things happening in clinical trials that I do believe for many of you, hopefully in your lifetimes, will have hopefully direct benefit for you and your family members. So that's the main message. I'll do that hopefully by reviewing key findings in some recent research studies and discuss some of the open and current studies being conducted both in adults and now in children. And also at the end, talk a little bit about some considerations for research participation in adults and children. Just over halfway through this talk, I will have some slides from Dr. Margulies to give you a window into some of the exciting things happening at the bench in the translational research realm. In terms of research that one should care about, I thought it would be important just to talk about there are different types of research. Some research that helps us just to better understand a medical condition. So a study that might not come out on the end of it with a treatment that affects, that helps someone survive longer, but that will eventually build towards effective treatments. Other studies do specifically investigate treatments to slow a disease down or to prevent symptoms or make symptoms better. And then once we gain a better understanding of the underlying causes of a disease or condition, researchers can take aim at that ultimate goal of a cure or a long-lasting treatment. So there are many different types of research. And the road to effective drug development, I will admit that it can seem like it takes a very long time, but we do have things in the pipeline all along this process. So that's at least encouraging, I hope. So some of the stuff that we'll talk about from Dr. Margulies' lab would fall in this discovery or preclinical testing realm. And those are tests that take place at the bench, in petri dishes, in animal studies. And that can take many years to get towards a human study. But when a drug or a compound or a treatment is thought to be promising and ready for safety and efficacy studies in in humans, then you hear about these phase 1, phase 2, and phase 3 trials. So what does that mean? Well, phase 1, which can usually take 1 to 2 years to get through, usually involves healthy volunteers, although on occasion in some rare diseases that may actually involve treatment in affected individuals. But the goal of a phase 1 trial is to determine safety and dosage of the treatment that's proposed. A phase 2 trial, which also can take about 2 years, is really designed to look at effectiveness for preliminary signal and also look for side effects in people who have the affected condition. And then phase 3, which is often called your pivotal trial, those will take usually 3 to 5 years to enroll and then complete through the follow-up of a study. That ideally involves thousands of volunteers, at least for some of the larger adult trials. And those are the trials designed, usually randomized, controlled with a sugar pill versus a treatment arm. So these are designed to confirm the effectiveness of a treatment and monitor for adverse reactions for the long-term use of a new medication or drug or intervention. And then even after that, there should be other studies and approval processes that happen really to get a drug or a treatment to market. So what are some of the current and upcoming trials in adults? I got to learn a lot from putting this together, and I hope you'll be excited about these things too. The first thing I wanted to talk about is one of these, learning more about the underpinnings of a disease study. It's called the DCM Precision Medicine Study, and this really embraces that idea of precision medicine, which according to the NIH is an emerging approach for disease treatment and prevention that takes into account individual variability in things like genes, environment, and lifestyle for each person. So this particular study is testing the hypothesis or the theory that most cases of what we call idiopathic DCM, meaning we don't know what causes it, well, actually, most of those cases probably have a genetic basis. At least that's what the researchers who are involved in this study believe. And the point of the study is really to further our understanding of dilated cardiomyopathy as a genetic disease, and a genetic disease that should be managed using genetic diagnostic tools and family-based preventive strategies. So this study is currently enrolling at multiple DCM consortium sites, of which Penn Medicine is a center. And they're recruiting a lot of folks. I don't know if any of you in the audience here have been approached to be a part of the study, but they're trying to get a really wide swath of folks of different ancestries and ethnicities who have dilated cardiomyopathy, and then also about 2,600 family members as well. There will be genetic testing performed for all the probands or the affected individual who's identified first, and also genetic testing for any affected family members discovered. Those people who are probands are randomized to an intervention or non-intervention, and that intervention is designed to improve family communication about DCM risk. Another study that's open right now for adults with dilated cardiomyopathy sort of falls in with this idea of precision medicine. So this is specifically for folks with symptomatic dilated cardiomyopathy who carry a lamin AC gene mutation. This is the medication by Array Biopharma. Doesn't have a catchy name yet, but they'll get there. It's a phase 3 randomized control trial of this Array 371797 compound, and it's going to be followed by an open label extension wherein all the participants should be offered the chance to continue either continue on the medication or the compound. So during the randomized controlled trial, they'll either be on a sugar pill, placebo, or the treatment, but at the end of the study, then they get offered this open label extension to continue on the Array compound. This Array compound is a p38 alpha inhibitor, so this is proposed to prevent dilation of the left ventricle, improve the squeeze or ejection fraction of the heart, and decrease fibrosis. And this is a study that's recruited now and hopefully at least complete enrollment by next summer. And there are 67 sites enrolling for this study, including Penn Medicine. Another category of potential compounds that could help with cardiomyopathy patients, the type of cardiomyopathy, again, would be those who have decreased systolic function, usually the dilated cardiomyopathy subset. This category is called a myosin activator. The most well-studied so far of which is called omecamtiv mecarbil. This is a compound put out by Amgen. It should augment ATP hydrolysis, which is your energy-producing process, and speed up production of this strong binding between actin and myosin as opposed to the weak binding, and thus increase force production, or how well the heart squeezes. Just of note, omecamtiv is not the only myosin activator being studied out there. I know at least one other company, Myocardia, has another myosin activator in phase 2 clinical trials. But for the next few slides, I'm just going to tell you about some of the clinical trials that omecamtiv has been used in. So these names all have space-aged acronyms. You have to be really savvy in cardiology and have really fun, catchy names for a good clinical trial. So their first study was the Atomic Acute Heart Failure Trial, and this was studying an IV formulation of omecamtiv. And the primary endpoint for this trial actually was not met. So omecamtiv given IV for acute heart failure patients didn't improve dyspnea in the overall cohort of about 600 patients. But there were signals that it still might be a helpful drug. The secondary endpoints, including really how well the heart is squeezing and whether the left ventricular volumes improve, did look like they got better. The drug was well tolerated. And in a pre-specified analysis of the folks who got the highest dose, they did show improvement in their outcome of shortness of breath. So there's also an oral formulation of this omecamtiv compound, and there's been a phase 2 trial of omecamtiv given orally to chronic heart failure patients who have an ejection fraction less than 40%. And in this phase 2 trial, increasing the dose did achieve higher concentrations in the blood, and those were associated with improved parameters. So the systolic ejection time, the stroke volume, the end diastolic and end systolic dimensions, heart rate, and this blood marker called NT-proBNP all improved in these patients who were enrolled, and the adverse events were similar between the treatment arm and the sugar pill or placebo arm. So this was very promising, which has led to 2 other intergalactic type of trials. So the Galactic heart failure trial is a phase 3 study of omecamtiv, and the Meteoric heart failure trial, also a phase 3 study. These are for adults with heart failure who have an ejection fraction less than 35%. For the Galactic heart failure study, the primary outcome is this composite endpoint of major adverse cardiovascular events. That study has finished recruiting, and the results are pending. We're all very interested to see what the results are going to be. And then the Meteoric heart failure study, where they're looking at a primary outcome measure of exercise capacity. The enrollment for this study is still ongoing at multiple sites. So moving on to a compound that's showing great promise in the hypertrophic cardiomyopathy population, mavacamten, or MYK, or MYC-461, is a small molecule that can selectively modulate cardiac myosin ATPase. Try to say that 3 times fast. And in hypertrophic cardiomyopathy mutant mice, mavacamten prevented hypertrophy or thickening of the heart. It reduced that myocyte disarray that you can see under the microscope, and it reduced interstitial fibrosis as well. So this compound has moved on to several studies, including a phase 2 open-label pilot study for symptomatic obstructive hypertrophic cardiomyopathy patients. I think Penn Medicine was one of the 5 sites who enrolled patients to the study, so some of you in here may have actually been approached for this. They found in this phase 2 study that mavacamten reduced outflow tract obstruction, improved exercise capacity, and improved symptoms for these hypertrophic cardiomyopathy patients who have outflow tract obstruction. They did also see that at higher doses, the ejection fraction did come down some, and atrial fibrillation was seen. So important safety flags to keep an eye on in further studies. So there is a phase 3 randomized control trial of mavacamten versus placebo or sugar pill. And this is for adults who have symptomatic obstructive hypertrophic cardiomyopathy. This is the Explorer HCM trial. Enrollment for the study is now complete, and we're expecting at least some preliminary results as early as the summer of 2020. The primary outcome for this study is a composite of how well folks feel in this New York Heart Association classification and also their exercise capacity. And I believe that the open label extension for this study is now enrolling. So folks who enrolled in the study didn't know if they were getting sugar pill or treatment are now able to elect if they want to stay on the active treatment. So what about folks who have HCM and have symptoms from hypertrophic cardiomyopathy without obstruction? There's a trial for that too. So this is actually a phase 2 study of mavacamten versus placebo in adults who have symptomatic non-obstructive cardiomyopathy that's hypertrophic. The enrollment for this study is complete, and also we have at least preliminary results expected in 2020. And also for this study, the open label extension is enrolling. So I also wanted to make sure we talked about not just clinical trials where treatments, new drug treatments were explored, but I wanted to talk a little bit about a study wherein we looked at safety and potential benefits of things that people want to consider doing in their everyday life. So the RESET HCM study was a pilot randomized control trial to look at safety and potential benefits of moderate intensity exercise in adults with hypertrophic cardiomyopathy. The participants who were in the exercise group underwent 4 months of customized exercise training. The goal was eventually to get up to 60 minutes a day at a 70% of heart rate reserve, all within the national guidelines for recreational exercise. And a couple of years ago, Dr. Day and her group published the results of this study. And they showed that exercise capacity did get better at 16 weeks in the moderate intensity exercise group as compared with placebo, and there were no adverse events in either group. So promising. And finally, some studies starting to look proactively at the role of exercise in hypertrophic cardiomyopathy, rather just looking at what we should restrict people from doing. What about kids? So there are actually some trials, current and upcoming, that children will be eligible for, and some of these studies are actually for both children and adults. I first want to mention Entresto. So this is also known as sacubitril valsartan, or LCZ. This is a medication that Dr. Owens mentioned. It does help tip the neurohormonal balance back towards a favorable balance of vasodilation over vasoconstriction. And in 2014, for adults, that Paradigm heart failure study showed a survival benefit for the LCZ compound compared to enalapril. So there is now a Panorama heart failure study for children to see if this medication has the same effectiveness for children with dilated cardiomyopathy. So children anywhere between 1 month and 18 years old may be eligible if they have systolic dysfunction. Part 1 of the study is an open-label pharmacokinetic pharmacodynamic study where we look at dosing and how it affects the blood concentrations. And then Part 2 is a randomized study that involves treatment over the course of a year, and patients are randomized to either LCZ or enalapril. And the primary outcome is going to be this global ranking of clinical events. And we're currently enrolling at 118 sites, including the Children's Hospital of Philadelphia. And I think at least a few people in this audience have had children considered for or enrolled in this study. The VANISH study is a phase 2 study randomizing patients to Valsartan versus placebo, looking at whether Valsartan, which is an angiotensin receptor blocker, could attenuate early hypertrophic cardiomyopathy. So for folks who are asymptomatic or only very mildly symptomatic. All subjects were genotype positive for this study for an HCM sarcomere mutation. Group 1 were those who had overt hypertrophic cardiomyopathy between ages 8 and 45. And group 2 were those who have preclinical HCM, so genotype positive but without any evidence of hypertrophy between ages 10 and 25. And for this study, the enrollment is complete, and we're all interested to see what the results will be. The LIVE HCM study is an observational patient registry evaluating how lifestyle and exercise impact well-being for individuals with HCM. And those who participate will, over the course of 3 years, have every 6-month interviews, quality of life assessments. They're asked to use a Fitbit on occasion to look at their activity levels. There's a consent for a review of their medical records and reporting of any events that happened during the course of the study. And this registry is enrolling at 39 sites for children and adults between ages 8 and 60. A really important study to better understand what impacts well-being in folks with HCM. And then finally, I wanted to put in a little plug for a study that Dr. Burstein is leading up, hopefully in the near future at CHOP, sort of inspired by the work that Dr. Day and their group have done looking at exercise in adults with HCM. We've proposed a pilot study to evaluate moderate intensity exercise as a prescription for hypertrophic cardiomyopathy adolescents. So we'll be looking to enroll HCM patients ages 8 to 18 in a 12-week individualized exercise training regimen. This study is currently under review at our IRB, and we'd love to be able to start sometime this winter. And then one brief mention, people often ask about gene therapy. Danon disease is one of those particular diseases with a known genetic cause whose research has progressed to the point that they're now at the point of testing this gene therapy in humans with Danon disease. So the phase 1 open-label clinical trial to characterize safety and toxicity of the transgene for the causative mutation in Danon disease using a viral capsid is now open. Groups 1 and 2 is going to have older children and young adults, and groups 3 and 4, ages 8 to 14-year-olds. And it's currently enrolling at UCSD, and they're looking to expand to additional sites, including here in Philadelphia. A brief word about clinical trials. You have to weigh whether enrolling in a clinical trial are the risks and the benefits in favor of participation. Is it a foregone conclusion that this trial has a treatment that's really going to work? Because if so, why do they still need to study it, right? In weighing whether or not to participate, you want to make sure that you're going to be able to participate through the whole study and ask about whether open label extension is available, because the drug may not be approved for several years even after the trial. I have a list here of some helpful questions that you can consider asking if you're asked to enroll in a clinical trial. Things like, how long will my participation last? Do I have any other treatment options? And will my doctors and I have access to the results of any testing performed as part of the trial? And I'm happy to talk about these more with you individually if you have questions about clinical trial participation. So to summarize this part of the talk, the road to effective treatment can be long, but there are many exciting options at various points along the development pipeline now in 2019. Observational studies are important, registries are important, quality of life studies are important, and they add to our understanding of disease and what's important to people who live with conditions like HCM, DCM, and other cardiomyopathies. And finally, the decision to participate in a clinical trial has to take into account a person's individualized evaluation of the risks and the benefits of participation in the study. So take a little breather. I'm going to ask for the shorter slide deck just to give you guys a window into some of the research that's taking place at the bench and hopefully soon towards bedside. The slides that I'm going to present to you are courtesy of Dr. Ken Margulies and represent ongoing efforts from the laboratories at the Penn Cardiovascular Institute. So Dr. Margulies and Dr. Prosser's lab, amongst others, utilize human heart tissues from transplant recipients and organ donors for translational research that's specifically designed to identify and ultimately target clinically relevant mechanisms of disease. So as highlighted on this slide, there are efforts to obtain hearts from previously consented patients, either in the operating room or from donor families. They protect the heart cells and get them very quickly to the Margulies lab at Penn to isolate these heart muscle cells. Investigators then study and compare the contractility or the ability to squeeze and also the cellular architecture of the cells that are found in failing hearts and also non-failing hearts. So here we have a nice diagram of the molecules and proteins and structures that are found within cardiomyocytes or heart muscle cells. Many of these elements may be familiar to you because you may know that you have a genetic basis for your cardiomyopathy that includes actin or myosin or titin. So many of these elements are directly involved in generating the muscle contraction that drives the pumping of an intact heart. And the so-called cytoskeleton within heart muscle cells, including these proteins and other structures, they give shape to the cardiomyocytes, just like our skeletons provide structure and shape to our bodies. As we've learned in other settings, having a skeleton to provide proper structure and shape is very important, especially here at the Boneless Chicken Ranch. So here with this diagram, the contractile proteins like actin and myosin are really part of a more extensive cytoskeletal complex, and that involves cross-linking at specified location within the cells. And there are interactions with other molecules. These may also sound familiar to you. So molecules like desmin, dystrophin, alpha-actinin. We know that these interactions are important because mutations in these cross-linking proteins can cause cardiomyopathy. Another interaction shown here is an interaction between actin filaments and the cytoskeletal structure, including microtubules here. Interaction between the contractile and non-contractile cytoskeletal proteins are pivotal for transmitting the force generated by a cell to surrounding cells, and that provides a muscle contraction in the heart. On this cartoon, microtubules are just a single thick line right down here. But recent advances in live cell imaging have allowed us to get a much better look at the actual appearance of cardiomyocyte microtubule network. And as you'll see, this may be a window into things that we could intervene on and make better in folks with cardiomyopathy. So using these advanced live cell imaging techniques, we've learned that those cartoons that I showed you don't adequately represent the real structure of the microtubular network. And so this video shows you a better look. And it shows you that the microtubule network is really very extensive, complex, and really dense. So each of the billions of cardiomyocytes making up our beating hearts all have these cytoskeletal elements, including microtubules. So on the upper left here, this is actually a pretty advanced imaging technique called confocal microscopy to try to show us cardiac microtubules. But it's rather faint, it's not dynamic, and it's not very well defined. Here on the lower left, labeled microtubules are visualized with this more advanced ARI scan technique, and it really does outline the microtubules better. But up here, you can see that with improved temporal resolution, so putting time in there, you can see how microtubules, which were thought to just be these like cytoskeletal like bones, they're more than bones. They actually beat each time our heart muscle cells beat, and they deform in a sort of buckling dynamic. And here, when we speed up the imaging and then slow it down to 1/8 the actual speed, hopefully it'll show here. It's at the end of this picture, sorry. They have these imaging techniques with temporal resolution that can show you the contraction and the recoil. These microtubules, they look like shock absorbers. And when the shock absorbers don't work right, the heart muscle doesn't work right. So further studies of the microtubule proteins in the heart show us that small changes in the structure can have a big effect on the structure and stiffness of the microtubule network. Microtubules are made of many molecules of tubulin. That makes sense, microtubule. So the addition or subtraction of a tyrosine at the end of tubulin makes a really big difference. When tyrosine's added by an enzyme called TTL, the microtubular network becomes less stable. There are fewer cross bridges, and it's less stiff. And then when tubulin is removed by VASH1, you have more stability, you have more cross bridges, and you have more stiffness. But sometimes more stiffness is not good. It's worth noting that a medicine that some of you may have heard of called colchicine can be used to severely disrupt the myocyte microtubule network. It can do this within a couple of hours in a petri dish, but due to toxicity at the doses required, colchicine itself is not a promising drug for cardiomyopathies. It is a useful compound to illustrate the effects of microtubule stability on the contraction of heart muscle cells. I'm going to skip through this a little bit, but use this just to show you that when detyrosinated, so tyrosine is taken off of the microtubulin, the failing hearts have a lot more detyrosinated tubulin, and the hearts are much stiffer. And you can see that in this blot. You can see that when we measure by different techniques. And there's actually an inverse relationship of how detyrosinated the tubulin is and how well the heart squeezes, or what the left ventricular ejection fraction is. Sorry. This slide shows the impact of manipulating the tyrosination and the detyrosination balance on heart muscle cells with cardiomyopathy and from organ donors with normal hearts. So over here on the left, this is how much shortening a cell has, and this is time on the x-axis. You can see in gray, a non-failing heart shortens a lot, and it relaxes very quickly, whereas a failing heart does not shorten as much, and it takes longer to relax. This down here is a heart that is taken from a failing dilated cardiomyopathy sample, and when treated with colchicine to disrupt the microtubular network, you can see the purple tracing goes much closer to the normal light gray contractility tracing. And the same thing with a failing hypertrophic cardiomyopathy heart when treated with a compound that's going to disrupt the microtubular network, the tracing goes back to more closely resemble a normal contractility tracing. Sorry, I keep going there. So to summarize this window into stiffness and how stiffness might be a window into treatments, the density of the microtubular network within heart muscle cells is extensive. It's substantially increased in failing human hearts in association with an increased degree of tubulin detyrosination. So drug interventions that could disrupt this, such as colchicine or related compounds, or shift that balance towards greater tyrosination, could increase cardiac myocyte contractility. And targeting excess microtubules could become a new strategy for improving abnormal contractility and relaxation in the cardiomyopathies that are affected by excess stiffness. I want to thank Dr. Margulies and Dr. Prosser for sharing some of this information. Sorry you had to get it secondhand from me, but I thought that was a really neat window into some of the exciting things that are taking place at the bench. And with that, I think we can open up the floor to questions. Yeah?
Thank you so much, Dr. Lynn.